we've got articles, and there's one here from October 12. There's another one I've got from a few days before that, where you've got Rose Bay. Well, that'd be worth a lot of money, especially what do they call it I can't remember my house design. Is it a Queen Anne? It might be. It's early Federation. It's not a Federation. It's a cottage. I seriously think it's a Queen Anne, but I'm probably very wrong on that. Anyway, it's been a while since I looked at housing design era stuff. But anyway, this idea is that homeowners who have their house block, and a lot of the house blocks are now much smaller, but they group together to sell as part of a mega lot. In other words, you've got a property developer who wants to slap down some high-rise apartments and that sort of thing, but they're not going to fit on the footprint of a standard house block. They need to have a parcel. They need to have a much larger parcel of, say, 5 or 6 house blocks or more. And so they kind of get together and sell together as a mega lot. And in this case, they sold the mega lot, well, ideally sold it for close to $55 million. Fantastic. Selling up because she doesn't want to have her house with a tower block looking over it. Fair enough. But the idea is, I know you've got people in Rose Bay, and so if you know where Rose Bay and places like that are, you're like, well, yep, I can kind of understand why people are complaining about that. The fact she's then moving to an apartment in Vaucluse, well, God, obviously they've earned a lot of money because of it. I mean, even Marrickville. I mean, Marrickville's working class, not in a west or southwest, really. It's I always thought of Marrickville and places like that as really. I mean, they're not. They used to be fairly cheap because they were adjacent to Mascot or near Mascot, and so therefore the airport. They also used to be fairly industrial for many years, but their proximity to the city centre, to the CBD, has obviously seen their value change or go up a fair bit. So you got people there who like, look, we don't want to sell our house. We like our house, and that's a nice bungalow style. Not quite California bungalow. I think that is the name they use for it. Obviously, they've closed in verandas that were probably open in the past, but I mean that's 1950s maybe. I mean it's 100 years old now. So not quite 100 years old. They're nice houses, so yeah, if they're not interested. Concerned about obviously what's going to happen to the heritage of the suburb, but at the same time, you're trying to increase the density. Increasing in value means your rates shoot up. All sorts of problems trying to keep things on. Trying to keep people want increased density, but they don't want the high density increases. It's not just saying, oh well, we've got this regulatory restriction. You can't magic land out of nothing. You've got to get the existing people to sell up, and in the case of these large developments, you need to have multiple units selling at the same time, so that multiple blocks selling at the same time, so you can build the higher density housing. So these mega lots where you're selling grouped housing and stuff like that to then allow the larger development to go in. The idea that Rose Bay is going to turn into something like Bondi Junction, I can see that not going down well with people who live in Rose Bay. And so you've got this concern where people are like, well, hang on, should I sell up because it's a lot of money, or do I want to stay put because I've always liked living in Rose Bay? And you've got this idea, like where people, this statement here from the local MP, that it seems like an arbitrary approach to planning where there's desperate drawing of circles on maps. It kind of does appear like that as somebody from outside trying to observe and see how this goes. Now, the Sydney Morning Herald, of course, are going to focus on Sydney, but you shouldn't think that this is unique just to Sydney. This is affecting pretty much most metropolitan areas around Australia, in fact, most larger sites. But maybe not to the same extent. The idea, and then this comes down to it's almost in fact, it is a prisoner's dilemma as to how you, like when you agree to sell into a mega lot, if payment isn't forthcoming, because it's not all of these developers have the cash up front to pay the full amount, or they're not financed. They're basically relying on apartment pre-sales to fund development and also to fund the purchase of the land. And if there's delays getting approval, then the agreed upon sale price at the time for the property is not going to be the value of the property when it's eventually settled. It could be years later, or the development may fall through, and therefore the initial vendors are left high and dry, and or there's concern where, well, if you want to get out early, get your payment, it may take a lower amount but guarantee sale. You've got this idea where, okay, you've got a group of people with a nominally a common interest, but the moment issues start coming in, it becomes a race for money. And the first out generally will get the money that they are owed or close to it and bug out long before whatever eventual development takes place on the site. And potentially you're then stuck with people who held on and waited, who are then unable to sell because now their existing property is being overlooked by these massive tower blocks and stuff, and so they lose out on the eventual value. And the idea that, yep, you've band together, delight that you've gotten a bigger money than usual. However, the reality being it rapidly turns into the prisoner's dilemma and people suddenly turn against each other. Yeah, the moment you bring money into things and the idea that if somebody bails early, they're going to walk away with more than everybody else, it tends to upset people. Completely understandable. So the options here, and the same for not just mega blocks, but large house blocks. I mean, 2,000 square meters in Rose Bay. Wow, not a surprise that it's in the tens of $1 million. And the idea that these things don't go ahead as well, there's all sorts of issues going back and forth and everything else, and that the agreements and ideas, and a lot of this stuff is just, as I say, it's not worth the paper it's printed on. They're trying to lock in deals and they're not working, but at the same time, there still needs to be land. So the issues are going to be, well, how they're not necessarily going through. And they're not going through for the same value. It's going to be scary. Eventually it'll go through. I mean, but that's that one. The other article from a few days previously was a group near Castle Hill for development, they all had, freestanding houses. There's tower blocks and stuff nearby. So they banded together to make a mega sale, first one in Castle Hill. But the issue was, okay, so they were supposed to have a $42 million offer for the entire thing. They get close to 3.5 for their house, but it's more than 10 years later, and it still hasn't sold. The plan still hasn't gone through. Only 3 out of the 10. How many numbers were there? 10 neighbours, yeah. So 11 out of. So 30% have been paid in full, and everybody else is sitting there waiting because the approvals for the tower blocks and stuff haven't come through. The developer is waiting on the sale to fund and finance pre-sales and everything else. And so you had these 3 owners being paid in full was because they eventually legged it. And so the prisoner's dilemma. And instead of staying together and holding out, that's a lot of land on the waterfront. The article here, so delayed settlement and stuff like this. Okay, so what went wrong? They knew that it might be up to 2 years before they get settled from 2015 to 2017. So, before the agreement officially exchanged, they settled on the full amount in 2017. Okay, we're now 10 years later. Can't imagine the prices has gone down in that time. Had they received their money back in 2017, they could have repurchased and everything else and done lots of other bits and pieces, but it then went to poo. And like the other article said, more often than not, it goes to poo. And so the initial proposal for the 2 towers, 2017, got knocked back by the council. Some of the 11 negotiated an early settlement for a discounted price, and so they basically settled almost immediately in and around the same bracket. But as soon as people found out that this had happened, bang, everything falls apart. It's a classic prisoner's dilemma, and it's kind of interesting to get these really clear examples of it taking place. And it's the psychology, really. People fear that if they don't move and make their deal first, they're going to be left not just with the consequences, but they're going to be left with something that is not worth what they thought it was initially. Now, 10 years in Sydney, I think their property values have gone up, but still, they had this agreement to sell 10 years ago, and it's impacted their ability to do anything with the property since. So, stricter lending rules is at fault. Well, I don't know if you're claiming that that's not good enough. Developers need a great number of pre-sales before they can begin construction. Clearly, the plan was not only was it knocked back, but the pre-sales market died overnight. Well, there you go. Wasn't going to go ahead. Don't know why people seem surprised. Return on investments smaller. Blah 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 blah. There's plenty of reasons why it's falling through, and they're now getting offers to complete at a reduction on initial prices and to waive penalties. I think people are going to hold out. It's been long enough. Basically, they're going to have to walk away, and the company that's gone in on it is going to have to take penalties. Plus, you wouldn't be putting money into maintenance at that point because the place is going to get knocked down. Yeah, it's now obviously developers are facing costs, which are completely unsurprised, plus interest, and it's just there's a reason why people have have concerns about property development and approvals and stuff in and around Sydney. And there's been allegations of over years, and there's been people who've gone to the corruption commissions and stuff like that, big based on this sort of stuff. Property development and approvals in and around Sydney is wasn't a clean game for many years.